The sun rose gently over the wide fields, casting a golden glow across the tall grass that moved like a quiet ocean. Birds sang in the distance, and the smell of fresh soil mixed with morning dew filled the air. In the middle of those endless fields stood a small ranch house painted white with a red roof, simple but strong. This was the home of a man named Adam. Adam was not rich, but he was proud of what he had built. His ranch was not only his property but his dream. He had worked for years to buy the land, clear it, and turn it into a place of peace. Horses ran in the fenced fields, cows grazed slowly, and a few chickens scratched the ground near the barn. Every corner of the ranch carried his effort, from the wooden fence he had nailed together to the old water well he had repaired with his own hands. The ranch was more than land. It was where Adam felt free. It was where he believed his future would grow. He imagined raising a family here, teaching his children how to ride a horse, watching them run under the same sun that warmed him now. But for Adam, life was not only about his dreams. He had also given his word to his country. Adam was a soldier. He had joined the army when he was young, driven by a sense of duty. Serving overseas had already taken him far from home once, and he knew it could happen again. Still, he accepted it. He believed in honor, and he believed in protecting others. When the letter came, asking him to serve once more, he did not hesitate. On the morning he prepared to leave, Adam stood quietly at the edge of his porch. His boots rested on the wooden floor, his hat low over his eyes. The wind moved across the fields, and the horses raised their heads as if they knew he was leaving. Adam sighed. Leaving the ranch was never easy, but this time it felt heavier. The world beyond the ranch was uncertain, and he did not know how long he would be gone. He walked through the fields one last time, touching the wooden posts of the fence as he passed. He fed the animals and checked the barn doors twice to make sure they were locked. Then he stopped near the old oak tree that stood tall at the edge of the land. He placed his hand on the rough bark and whispered a promise that he would return. Before he left, he met with the local homeowners association, the group that managed the community around the ranch. The HOA was supposed to be there to protect the neighborhood, keeping everything fair and safe. Adam trusted them because he had little choice. He explained he was leaving overseas and asked them to keep an eye on things. The leader of the HOA, a man named Robert, nodded politely and promised that everything would be fine. Adam believed him. He had no reason not to. When Adam drove away, the ranch seemed to fade slowly behind him, swallowed by the horizon. His truck carried him down the road, past neighbors who waved and wished him well, and soon he was gone, heading toward a duty that was bigger than his land, bigger than his dreams. Life overseas was harsh. The days were long, filled with drills, patrols, and missions. Adam missed his ranch with every sunrise and every night under the stars. Sometimes, when the camp grew quiet, he would close his eyes and imagine the smell of fresh hay, the sound of cows in the barn, and the sight of his porch lit by the golden evening sun. His letters home often carried a single line he repeated to himself: "I will return to my ranch." But back home, not everything was as it seemed. The HOA, which Adam had trusted, began to see his absence as an opportunity. At first, it was small things. They claimed his grass was growing too high, even though a neighbor had offered to help cut it. They sent notices about minor repairs, saying his fence looked weak or his barn roof was not up to standard. With Adam gone, no one stood to defend him. The letters piled up unanswered until the HOA began to act on its own. Robert, the HOA leader, was not a kind man. He was strict, proud, and often greedy. Where others saw Adam's ranch as a home, Robert saw it as valuable land. He whispered to others in the HOA board that Adam might never return, that soldiers overseas were gone for years and sometimes never came back. If the ranch was abandoned, why not sell it and use the money for the community fund? The board agreed, not because it was right, but because Robert pushed hard. Month by month, they built a case. They marked Adam as a non-compliant owner. They wrote fines he never knew about. They declared the property abandoned. And when no one stood to stop them, they sold the ranch to a stranger who had never even met Adam. The fields, the barn, the animals, everything that carried Adam's sweat and dreams was handed over to someone else. Adam knew none of this. To him, the ranch was waiting, standing strong under the same sky. His thoughts of home gave him courage when missions grew dangerous. He told his friends in the army about his land, describing the oak tree, the horses, and the barn with such love that they often said they felt like they had been there too. For Adam, the ranch was more than a place. It was his anchor. It was what kept him steady in the middle of chaos. Years passed. Finally, the day came when his duty was done. Adam was tired but proud. He had given his best, and now he could return to what he loved. He packed his bag, said farewell to his brothers in arms, and boarded the plane that would carry him home. His heart raced with every mile closer to the ranch. He imagined stepping onto the porch, hearing the creak of the wood, and smelling the earth that he had missed for so long. When the bus dropped him off at the edge of town, Adam's boots felt heavy on the road, but his spirit was light. He carried his duffel bag over his shoulder and walked down the familiar path. The trees he had known since childhood lined the road, their leaves whispering in the wind. He turned the corner, expecting to see his ranch shining under the sun, but what he saw froze him in place. The house was painted a different color. The barn had been changed. There was a strange car parked in the driveway, and in the field where his horses once ran, children he did not know played with a dog. The land was his, yet everything about it seemed to belong to someone else. Adam dropped his bag on the ground, his chest tight. He walked slowly toward the fence, gripping the wooden post as if to steady himself. A woman stepped out of the house, her expression puzzled. She looked at him as if he were a stranger. "Can I help you?" she asked. Adam opened his mouth, but no words came. This was his ranch, his home, his dream. Yet it had been taken from him while he was away serving his country. The promise he had made under the oak tree still echoed in his mind. He had told himself he would return, and he had. But now the ranch was no longer his. Adam stood silently, the weight of betrayal heavy on his shoulders. He had survived war overseas, but here on his own land, another kind of battle was waiting for him. Adam stood at the fence, his hand pressing against the rough wood. The woman from the porch waited for his answer. Her face showed both caution and curiosity. Adam finally found his voice, though it was quiet, almost like a whisper. "This is my ranch," he said. The woman frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, but this ranch belongs to my family. We bought it 2 years ago from the association." "We have the papers!" The words struck Adam like a hammer. Bought, papers, association. None of it made sense. His ranch was never for sale. He had left it safe and whole, only trusting the HOA to keep watch. How could it belong to someone else? He shook his head firmly. "No, this land is mine. I built it. I worked for it. I served my country and I left it behind. I never sold it." The woman's expression softened, but there was still distance in her eyes. She held her hands close to her chest. "I don't know what happened before we came, but we paid for this place. We signed with the HOA. Everything was legal. If you have a problem, you need to take it up with them." The words "take it up with them" repeated in his head. He turned slowly, picked up his duffel bag, and walked down the road without another word. His boots struck the dirt in heavy steps. Every memory of his ranch burned inside him, twisting into anger. He went straight to the small brick office of the HOA, which sat in the center of the town. A polished sign above the door read, "Community Association Office." The windows were bright and clean, the lawn trimmed to perfect edges. To Adam, it looked less like an office and more like a mask hiding something rotten inside. When he stepped in, the air smelled of fresh paint and paper. Behind the front desk sat a woman in neat clothes, typing on a computer. She looked up when Adam entered, her smile practiced but shallow. "Good afternoon. How may I help you?" she asked. Adam set his bag down with a heavy thud. His voice was steady, though fire burned behind it. "My name is Adam. I owned the ranch on Oakfield Road. I've just come back from service overseas. I went to my land and strangers are living there. They told me the HOA sold it. I want answers." The woman's smile faded. She shifted in her chair, her fingers tapping nervously on the desk. "One moment. I'll call Mr. Robert for you." Moments later, a tall man in a dark suit walked out of the back office. His hair was slick, his steps slow and controlled. This was Robert, the HOA leader. He looked Adam over from head to toe, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, well," Robert said with a cold smile. "I thought you might come back one day." "Adam, isn't it? The soldier boy with the wrench." Adam's fist clenched, but he kept his voice calm. "That ranch is mine." "What did you do?" Robert spread his hands as if he were innocent. Now, there's no need for anger. The association followed the rules. You were absent for years. Your property fell into neglect. Fines piled up. Notices went unanswered. The board declared it abandoned. We followed every step. We sold it fairly. The new owners paid in full. Everything is by the book. Adam's chest tightened. By the book? I left to serve. I didn't abandon anything. I trusted you, and you stole it from me. Robert's smile turned thin, his eyes sharp. Watch your words. Nothing was stolen. You were gone too long. The community has standards. Your ranch broke them. We acted for the good of everyone. You lost your chance. Adam stepped closer, his voice low and steady. That land is my blood and sweat. You had no right. Robert didn't flinch. He leaned back slightly as though enjoying the moment. You can try a lawyer if you want, but the law is on our side. The papers are signed. The ranch is gone. Accept it and move on. For a moment, silence filled the room. Adam stared at Robert, feeling the weight of betrayal press harder than any battlefield wound. He turned without another word, picked up his bag and walked out. The streets outside felt different now. The town he had once trusted seemed colder, its smiles thinner. Neighbors who once waved now looked at him with confusion, unsure of the story behind his loss. Adam carried his bag toward the small inn at the edge of town. He rented a room, sat on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. His mind replayed every word Robert had said. Fines, abandoned, sold, all excuses, twisted into lies. That night, sleep did not come easily. He lay awake thinking of the oak tree, the horses, the barn. He remembered the promise he had made to return, and he felt that promise breaking inside him. But deep down, Adam was not a man who gave up. The battlefield had taught him endurance. If he could survive war, he could survive this. He just had to find the right way. The next morning, Adam began searching. He went to the county office asking for records. He studied the papers that showed his land transferred under HOA authority. The language was sharp and cold, written in legal terms he barely understood. Every page told the same story. According to the system, he had lost everything. He spoke with a lawyer in town, a man named David, who listened carefully to his case. David frowned as he flipped through the papers. They covered their tracks well, he said. But I see gaps. If you were serving overseas, there are protections for service members. They might have broken federal law. It won't be easy, but you could fight this. Adam nodded slowly. Then I'll fight. I didn't spend years protecting my country just to have my home stolen. Word spread quickly around town that Adam was back, and that he was challenging the HOA. Some neighbors whispered support, remembering how he had once helped them fix fences or carry hay. Others shook their heads, fearing the power of Robert and the board. The HOA had ruled for years, strict and untouchable. Few dared to oppose them. Robert, hearing that Adam was stirring trouble, called for a meeting. The HOA board gathered in the polished office, their voices low but tense. Robert's face was stern. This soldier doesn't know when to quit, he said. He's trying to fight us. We cannot let him win. If he does, the whole community will see us as weak. Keep the records clean. Keep the neighbors quiet, and if he pushes too hard, we'll remind him that the law is on our side. But Robert underestimated Adam. A soldier who had faced fire and chaos would not be shaken by paper threats. Adam began meeting people in town, telling his story. He showed them his service badge, his call papers, his proof of duty. He reminded them that while he was risking his life overseas, the HOA had stolen his ranch. The story lit a fire in the community. Old men shook their heads in anger. Young families whispered about how unfair it was. Veterans in town clenched their fists, saying they knew what it meant to serve and lose. Slowly, support gathered around Adam. Still, Robert pressed harder. Letters arrived at Adam's inn, warning him to stop his fight. Anonymous notes were slipped under his door, telling him he was wasting his time. But Adam only grew more determined. Each warning felt like another battle line drawn. One evening, Adam stood near the oak tree at the edge of his old land. The sun set in red light, shadows stretching long across the field. He touched the bark again, just as he had before he left for service. His voice was steady now. I'm back, he said quietly. And I'm not leaving without my home. The wind moved through the branches, carrying his words into the night. Adam knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that a soldier never turned his back on a fight worth winning. The battle for his ranch had only begun. Adam's days in the small inn were quiet, but his heart carried a storm. Each morning he rose before sunrise as he had in the army, and walked through town with his steady steps. The townspeople grew used to seeing him, though whispers always followed. Some called him a hero, others said he was wasting his time fighting the HOA. Yet Adam walked with his head high, never showing the weight he carried inside. Every path he took seemed to lead back to the ranch. Sometimes he stood at the edge of the road, watching the family that now lived there. The laughter of children floated across the fields, piercing his chest like sharp thorns. He did not blame them. They were not the enemy. They had bought the land believing it was rightfully theirs. It was Robert and the board who had stolen, using rules as weapons. One afternoon, Adam visited the lawyer David again. David spread new documents across the table, pointing at the lines with a firm finger. "Here," David said. "This section proves you were deployed. Under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, the HOA was not allowed to sell your property without giving you protection." But Robert twisted the words, made it look like you ignored their notices. "We can take this to court." Adam leaned forward, reading the lines again and again. The words were clear, yet the path ahead looked long and hard. "How long will this take?" he asked. David sighed. "Months, maybe years. The HOA has money. They will drag this out, hoping you give up." Adam sat back, silent for a moment. His hands rested on the table, strong but worn. "I won't give up," he said finally. "If I could wait years to come home, I can wait years to reclaim it." The lawyer nodded. "Then we start." That evening, Adam walked to the diner in town. The smell of warm bread and coffee greeted him as he pushed the door open. Inside, old friends and strangers alike sat at tables talking softly. When they saw him, some nodded, some turned away, unsure of where they stood. An old man named Thomas, who had once worked with Adam on fencing, waved him over. "Sit with me, son," Thomas said kindly. Adam sat, and soon the table grew quiet as others listened. "Tell us the truth," Thomas said. "Did the HOA really take your ranch while you were gone?" Adam's voice was steady. "Yes, they claimed it was abandoned. They fined me, wrote me out, and sold it, all while I was overseas serving." The diner fell silent. A mother with her child frowned deeply. A group of young men shook their heads, muttering in anger. The story spread from table to table like fire across dry grass. By the end of the evening, half the town knew the details. Still, Robert's grip was strong. The HOA had power over the neighborhood, and many feared his anger. The next morning, Adam found a notice posted on the inn's door. Bold letters read, "Cease all false claims against the HOA or face legal action." Adam tore the paper down calmly. He folded it once and placed it in his pocket. Another piece of evidence. Another line in the growing story of betrayal. That night, Adam wrote letters to his old comrades. He told them about the ranch, the theft, the fight he faced. He did not ask for help, but he wrote from his heart, explaining the truth. He mailed the letters, not knowing what might come of them, only knowing he could not carry this burden alone forever. Days turned into weeks. Adam worked odd jobs in town to cover his stay at the inn. He hauled hay for farmers, repaired fences, and stacked wood. His hands stayed busy, his body strong, but every coin he earned felt like a reminder that his true work was waiting, reclaiming his land. One morning, Adam walked past the courthouse steps where Robert stood speaking with other board members. Their laughter carried across the street, sharp and mocking. Robert noticed Adam and raised his voice so all could hear. "You should have stayed overseas, soldier," Robert said with a sneer. "This town has no place for troublemakers." Adam stopped, his eyes steady. "I fought for this town while you sat in your office. I'll fight again if I must." The street went quiet. People paused, watching the two men face each other. Robert's smile thinned. He turned away, muttering something to his board. But Adam knew that moment had planted doubt in the people's minds. That evening, Adam sat by the oak tree once more. The sky burned with the colors of sunset, painting the land in gold and red. He closed his eyes, remembering the nights overseas when he had dreamed of this very view. He placed his hand on the bark. "I promised I'd return," he whispered. "I am here, and I will not let them take you away." Far away across the country, Adam's letters began to reach the hands of his comrades. Men and women who had served beside him, who had marched with him through dust and danger, read his words with heavy hearts. They remembered his stories of the ranch, the way he had described the oak tree and the horses as if they were treasures. They remembered his loyalty, his courage, and they knew they could not stand silent. One by one, they began to write back. Their letters carried words of strength, promises of support. Some said they would come visit. Others said they would speak out. Adam read them with quiet gratitude, each letter a spark of hope. The town began to stir as well. More people spoke quietly in the diner, at the market, on the porches of their homes. They asked why the HOA had acted so harshly. They questioned Robert's decisions. Some neighbors began to admit their own struggles with unfair fines and notices. The fight was no longer Adam's alone. A shadow of doubt stretched across the community, and whispers of resistance grew louder. But Robert was not blind. He saw the shift and his anger grew. He called another meeting of the board, his voice sharp as a knife. "We must crush this," he said. "If Adam wins, we lose control. Raise the fines on anyone who sides with him. Make them fear us. This town belongs to us, not to a soldier's dream." The board nodded, though unease showed in their eyes. They had followed Robert for years, but now the ground beneath them felt less firm. Meanwhile, Adam walked the roads with calm determination. He carried no weapon, no anger in his voice, only truth. He spoke to anyone willing to listen, telling them what had happened, showing them his service papers, his proof of deployment. The truth was his shield, and with it he began to turn hearts. One evening, as Adam returned to the inn, he saw a group of townsfolk waiting outside. Thomas stood among them, his old hands gripping a cane. The mother from the diner was there too, holding her child close. "We believe you," Thomas said, "and we stand with you." The group nodded, their faces firm. For the first time since his return, Adam felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. He was no longer standing alone. Still, he knew the road ahead would be long. Robert and the HOA would not surrender easily. But Adam had faced longer roads, harsher battles. He had walked through deserts and storms. He could walk through this. The night air was cool as Adam lifted his eyes to the stars. The same stars he had once seen overseas, the same stars that had guided him home. His heart steadied. His fight was only beginning, but he knew one thing with certainty. The ranch was not gone. It was waiting, and he would not rest until it was his again. The courthouse in town stood tall with its stone walls and wide steps. For many, it was a place of law and order, a place where justice was supposed to be found. For Adam, it became the battlefield where his new fight would take shape. He walked up those steps one morning with lawyer David by his side. Papers clutched in David's hand carried the proof of Adam's service, the record of his deployment, and the unfair sale of his land. Adam's boots echoed with each step, steady and strong, as though he marched not into a courthouse but into combat. Inside, the judge listened carefully as David spoke. The HOA sent their own lawyer, dressed in a polished suit with words as sharp as blades. He repeated Robert's story again and again. Adam had abandoned his property. Notices had been sent, fines had piled high. According to the HOA, everything was legal, but David pushed back. He pointed at the Service Members Civil Relief Act, explaining how the law protected those who served from losing their homes while away. He showed the dates of Adam's deployment, the letters that proved his absence was not neglect but duty. The judge nodded slowly, but his eyes revealed nothing. "I will review the case," he said at last. "This is not a simple matter. Until then, the current owners remain in the property. No changes will be made." Adam walked out with his jaw set. He had not expected quick victory. In war, no battle ended in a day. This was another long campaign, and patience would be his weapon. Robert, however, was not patient. News of Adam's case spread faster than he liked. The town buzzed with talk of the soldier fighting for his ranch. Some neighbors whispered of their own anger toward the HOA, and Robert felt control slipping. He called a private meeting in the office, his voice sharp as thunder. "We cannot allow him to win," Robert told the board. "If the court rules in his favor, every decision we've made will be questioned. We must bury him in paperwork, drag this case until he has nothing left." The board nodded nervously. They had always followed Robert's lead, but now doubt crept into their hearts. The town was beginning to turn against them, and Adam's steady presence made them uneasy. Meanwhile, Adam continued to live simply at the inn, working small jobs to pay his way. He carried no bitterness in his voice when he spoke to others. Instead, he spoke with calm strength, telling the truth again and again. His story reached more ears, and slowly the people who had once feared the HOA began to speak openly. At the diner, a farmer named Mark leaned across the table and said, "They fined me last year for a broken gate. I fixed it in 2 days, but they charged me anyway. I didn't fight because I was scared. But seeing you stand against them makes me think maybe we all should. Others shared similar stories. Unfair charges, threats of foreclosure, rules twisted to suit the HOA's power. The more Adam listened, the more he realized his fight was not only for his ranch. It was for everyone who had suffered under Robert's rule. One evening, Adam received a letter from one of his old army comrades, a man named Peter. The letter was written in firm handwriting. "Brother, I remember the way you spoke about your ranch under the desert sky. We all do. If they took it from you, they took it from all of us. Tell me when and I'll stand beside you." Adam folded the letter carefully and placed it with the others. The strength of his comrades gave him hope. They were far away, but their spirit walked with him. The weeks rolled into months. Each court session brought more arguments, more delays. The HOA lawyer demanded endless documents, hoping to drown Adam in details. But David pressed on, piece by piece building the case. One day, as Adam left the courthouse, Robert was waiting on the steps. His suit was sharp, his smile sharp as well. "You should quit while you can," Robert said coldly. "Even if you win here, you'll lose everything in the process. You're one man. We are many." Adam's eyes did not waver. "I've heard that before," he said. "And I'm still standing." The crowd gathered nearby whispered at his words. Robert's smile faltered, if only for a moment, before he turned and walked away. That night, Adam returned to the oak tree. He sat beneath its branches, the stars shining above. He thought of the long patrols overseas, the endless nights where hope felt far away. Yet he had survived them one step at a time. He would survive this too. As the wind rustled the leaves, he felt a hand rest gently on his shoulder. He turned and saw Thomas, the old man from town, standing with his cane. "You're not alone, son," Thomas said softly. "The town is watching. And more of us stand with you than you think." Adam nodded, his heart steady once more. The next morning, a small group of neighbors joined him on the courthouse steps. They carried no signs, made no noise. They simply stood behind him as he walked inside, showing that he was not alone. Robert's eyes darkened when he saw them, but Adam felt lighter. The struggle continued. Every hearing was a battle, every paper a weapon. Yet Adam grew stronger with each passing day, not because the fight grew easier, but because the people around him began to believe. Then came a turning point. David discovered a missing notice in the HOA's records. According to the law, the HOA was required to notify Adam's commanding officer before taking action. No such record existed. It was a small detail, but in law, small details could change everything. David smiled as he showed Adam the paper. This could be it. This could prove they broke the law. Adam felt a surge of hope. It was not victory yet, but it was a sign the tide was turning. Robert, sensing the danger, doubled his efforts. He spread rumors about Adam, claiming he was unstable from service, unfit to own land. But the people who knew Adam saw the truth in his calm eyes and steady voice. The lies fell flat, leaving Robert more desperate than before. One evening, Adam sat in the diner when a group of younger men approached him. They were strong, their clothes dusty from work in the fields. "We're with you," one of them said firmly. "If the HOA tries to push harder, they'll have to face all of us too." Adam thanked them, his voice low but warm. He did not ask for their help, but knowing it was offered filled him with strength. The struggle was far from over, but Adam could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. What had begun as one man's fight for his ranch was slowly becoming the town's fight for its freedom. Still, in the quiet of the night, Adam knew the hardest battles were yet to come. Robert was clever, the HOA powerful. The courtroom was only one front in this war. There would be more tests, more traps, but Adam had faced worse. And he had no thought of surrender. The ranch was not only wood and soil, it was his promise, his honor, his dream. And he would fight for it until the last page was written. Daniel sat alone in the quiet room of the small inn where he had been staying. The sun had already set, leaving the town covered in a mix of orange glow and fading shadows. He stared at the folded letter in his hands. It was a response from the county office, another refusal to recognize his claim on the ranch. They had written in careful words that the sale of his property had followed the rules of the homeowners association. The letter ended with the line that hurt him the most. "There is no further action that can be taken through our office." He laid the paper down on the table. For the first time since returning home, he felt a deep wave of defeat. The ranch had been his anchor, his place of belonging. Now strangers lived there, enjoying the peace and beauty of the land while he fought an endless battle against papers and signatures. But deep in his heart, Daniel knew one thing. He had never given up on the battlefield, no matter how heavy the odds. He was not going to give up here either. The next morning, Daniel walked to the local diner. He needed food, but more than that, he needed a moment among people. The bell over the door jingled as he entered, and the smell of coffee filled the air. A group of men sat at one of the corner tables. They were laughing and sharing stories in strong voices. Daniel recognized them instantly. They were not locals. They were soldiers. One of them looked up and his eyes widened. Daniel? Daniel froze, then smiled. Paul? It was Paul, his old comrade from overseas. The two embraced like brothers who had faced storms together. The other soldiers stood too, introducing themselves. Soon Daniel was seated among them, listening to the familiar rhythm of army talk. What are you doing here? Paul asked. Daniel told them everything. From his return to the ranch, the shock of finding strangers in his home, the endless fights with the HOA, and the letters that told him to stop trying. His voice did not shake, but his eyes carried the weight of it all. The soldiers were silent at first, but the silence was heavy with anger. Then one of them, a tall man named Lewis, slammed his fist lightly on the table. This is wrong. You served this country. You protected this land. And now they steal yours while you are gone? No, this is not justice. The others nodded in agreement. Paul leaned closer. Daniel, you are not alone in this. The army does not forget its own. If they think you will fight this battle by yourself, they are mistaken. The words filled Daniel with warmth. He had carried his struggle quietly, not wishing to burden others. But now, seeing his old brothers in arms, he realized he was not just fighting for land. He was fighting for something larger, for fairness that every soldier and every citizen deserved. The group of soldiers left the diner with Daniel. That evening they gathered at the inn. They sat in a circle, maps and papers spread across the table. Lewis brought out a laptop and began pulling up public records. Another soldier, Mark, took notes. They approached the problem like they would a mission. Clear steps, careful planning, no rushing. Step 1 was gathering evidence. Daniel shared copies of the letters, the deed he still held, and the notice he had never received about the sale. Paul shook his head. They counted on you being far away, unable to respond. That is not just unfair. That is abuse of power. Step 2 was exposing the truth. Mark suggested reaching out to local newspapers. Another soldier, Sarah, who had joined them later that night, knew someone working for a military magazine. Stories like this spread fast if they reached the right ears, she explained. Step 3 was strength in numbers. Paul reminded everyone that many soldiers had homes under the shadow of HOAs. If Daniel had been targeted, how many more might have been silent victims? They agreed to find out. The following days were filled with action. Daniel was no longer walking the path alone. Together they visited the county office again, this time with a group of uniformed soldiers at his side. The clerks grew uneasy as they realized this was no longer a private complaint. The soldiers asked questions calmly but firmly. They requested full documentation of the sale. When told it would take weeks, Sarah replied, "We will wait. We are not leaving without answers." The power of their unity was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Lewis contacted veterans groups. He explained Daniel's story, and soon voices of support poured in. Calls, emails, and letters reached the town from veterans all across the state. They demanded justice for their brother in arms. The local newspaper printed Daniel's story. The headline read, "Soldier returns from service to find ranch taken by HOA." The article spread quickly, stirring anger among readers. People began to question the practices of the HOA, and whispers of other unfair cases surfaced. One evening, as the group gathered again at the inn, Daniel looked around at the faces of his comrades. His heart was filled with gratitude. "I thought I was fighting this battle alone," he said. "But you all remind me of what we always knew. We never leave anyone behind." Paul placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we never will." The fight grew stronger with each passing day. Veterans from nearby towns began arriving. They came in uniforms and plain clothes, some with canes, some with medals pinned to their jackets. They gathered outside the HOA office, standing silently, a line of strength and unity. The message was clear. Daniel's ranch was not just his fight anymore. It was theirs too. The leaders of the HOA grew nervous, They had relied on papers, signatures, and hidden procedures to take what they wanted, but now the whole community was watching. The county was watching. The veterans were watching. Their quiet power was slipping away. One night, Daniel sat outside staring at the stars. Paul joined him. "Do you ever think about the nights overseas?" Paul asked. "Every day," Daniel replied. "The silence after the noise, the way we sat together under the sky holding on to hope." Paul nodded. "This feels the same, doesn't it? We are under fire again, but we are together, and that means we will win." Daniel smiled. For the first time since returning home, he felt that victory was possible. The ranch was close. Justice was close, but they knew the hardest part was yet to come. The HOA had not given up. They hired lawyers and prepared statements trying to defend their actions. They claimed Daniel had abandoned his property, that they had followed every rule. The soldiers were ready. They had gathered records showing the HOA had rushed the sale without proper notice, ignoring protections for active duty soldiers. They had testimonies from neighbors who remembered Daniel's ranch being cared for before he left. They even found other families who had lost homes in similar ways. By the end of the week, Daniel's case was no longer a quiet dispute. It was becoming a storm, one that could sweep across the state and perhaps the entire country. And Daniel, though weary, stood tall at the center of it. He was not just a ranch owner anymore. He was a soldier once again, leading a new kind of mission, and this time his brothers and sisters in arms were beside him, ready to march not on foreign soil but right here at home. The bond of the army had returned to him, stronger than ever. The brotherhood had become his shield, and soon it would become his sword. The next chapter of the battle was about to begin.